Aurora, thank you very much for joining us today. Amerigo Resources is a very unique company in that it's not a copper producer per se, but it processes copper from the tailings from Codelco's flagship copper mine in Chile. And before we examine Amerigo in more detail, why don't we first touch on Codelco for those who might not be familiar with the company?
Sure, that's a good place to start. Codelco is Chile's state-owned copper company, and it sits at the very center of the country's economic identity. Codelco has seven divisions or seven mines, and El Teniente is their most important operation. Codelco is currently the second largest global copper producer. It has more than 6% of global copper output. And just to give you some numbers, I think in 2025, Codelco produced around 1.4 million tons of copper. Now, speaking about Chile, just to put everything in context, Chile is the top global copper producer. It has a 23% of global copper share, and Codelco is Chile's top copper producer and operator. Um, but beyond the significant numbers that I just gave you, I think it's important for your listeners to understand Codelco a little bit more. It was formed in the 1970s after the nationalization of Chile's copper industry, and it is one of the primary engines for Chile's modern growth and economic development. In Chile, there is a very strong national pride and identity attached to Codelco. Copper is called often Chile's salary, and Codelco is seen as the steward of that resource for the people of Chile. So its operations are just not about the mining assets, it's also a very important symbol of Chile's technical capability and mining expertise. And for us at Amerigo, that context is very important because it means that we are aligned with a partner that is not only globally significant, but also very embedded in the country's long-term economic and social priorities. That's very important for us.
That's a great overview. And maybe you can just explain this relationship between Amerigo and Codelco and how long has this relationship been in place?
Sure. The relationship with Codelco, as you can gather, is foundational to Amerigo's business, and it is both a very long-standing relationship and also a highly aligned one. Amerigo operates through a company in Chile called Minera Valle Central, or MVC, that has been processing the tailings from the El Teniente mine uninterruptedly since 1992. The relationship between MVC and El Teniente is governed by long-term agreements under which El Teniente delivers its tailings to MVC. We reprocess those tailings to recover additional copper and molybdenum that would otherwise remain unrecovered. We pay an economic compensation to El Teniente for letting us work with their tailings, and then we return the tailings to El Teniente after processing them. So this is a true partnership model. Codelco, you could say, focuses on mining and the primary processing of that material, and we add value by improving overall resource recovery from the material that has already been mined and milled by El Teniente. From a systems perspective, this is very efficient. It's also environmentally responsible, and it's economically beneficial to both parties. For MVC, the tailings represent our resource equivalent, and MVC pays royalties to El Teniente based on production levels and copper prices. So there is an economic compensation that's also important and significant to El Teniente. Um, one other aspect to consider here is that this relationship has contractually been reinforced over time with multiple contract extensions that have provided us with more than 3 decades of continuous operations. Today, our agreements with Codelco continue well into the next decade, but we have this long life alignment with El Teniente that goes beyond that. So This is not a transactional relationship. It's integrated, it's long-term, it's mutually beneficial, and it is built around one of the world's most important mining complexes. So it underpins the stability of Amerigo's business model.
And why doesn't Codelco process the tailings themselves?
Well, Codelco's core mandate is to operate and develop large-scale mining assets. That means underground development, block caving, processing plants, and sustaining production at enormous operations like El Teniente. Those are all capital intensive, complex priorities that require very significant levels of investment. Tailings reprocessing, which is what we do, sits outside of that core focus. While there is still valuable copper and molybdenum in the tailing stream, it's just too little for them. It requires a very different operating model as well. So for them, it just wouldn't align with their capital return requirements. It would be a project that falls outside of their investment thresholds. For Amerigo, coming in makes a lot of sense because we offer a dedicated role, technical expertise to recover that residual value where every party is focusing on what they do the best. So it's just a very efficient way for Codelco to extract additional value without being distracted in a significantly smaller operation than anything that they have. So it's not that they couldn't do it. I think that the way of looking at it is that the partnership model that we have delivers a better outcome, both operationally and economically for both parties.
Aurora, let's look at El Teniente in a little more detail. How long has it been in production and what's the current mine life?
Well, El Teniente is a multi-decade asset. It has been in operation for more than 100 years. Based on Codelco's current mine plans and its structural growth projects, it has a remaining expected life of mine of more than 50 years. It is a cornerstone generational asset in global copper. Our current agreements with Codelco provide us with contractual security into 2037, but the volumes contemplated under those agreements give us more than that decade of highly visible production, because there is a significant upside beyond that as El Teniente continues to operate. There are two layers to that visibility that are important for us to talk about. One is that we have a layer coming from the fresh tailings. These are the tailings that are generated every day by El Teniente's ongoing operations, and they provide a stable, continuous feed source tied directly to that long life of mine. But we also work with historic tailings, which provide an inventory that can be sequenced and optimized over time, adding an additional level of control and longevity to our operation. So in just to recap, we're not relying on a finite ore body in the traditional sense. We are essentially attached to one of the world's longest life copper systems, which gives our business a very strong foundation and long-term optionality.
And I'm glad you brought up the point about the tailings. So once again, you process historical tailings and also fresh tailings. What's the difference between the two, just in terms of grade?
Sure. Well, the fresh tailings, as I mentioned, are tailings that are coming directly from El Teniente's current operations. They are recently processed ore, and they tend to have a more consistent grade and mineralogy than historic tailings. Historic tailings were deposited decades ago, and we work with them in a deposit called Cauquenes, which has undergone significant natural changes such as oxidation. So there will be a significant variance between the grade of one and the other. When we're talking about the grade in the fresh tailings, they are in 2025, we were working with grades of around 0.17% copper. whereas the historic tailings grade was around 0.24% copper. So the older tailings obviously have a higher grade because operations were not as efficient decades ago as they are now. So this is all showing that we work with very low grades by definition. You would not expect tailings to have um, grades comparable to what you would find in the head grades of a mine. But for us, it's still a significant metal content when you consider the volumes that are involved. And that's the key point. Just to provide some additional context, in an operation with a 0.1 to 2.2% grade, you wouldn't have an economic support for that operation. But you have to consider that our material, the tailings that we work with, have already been mined and ground. There is an existing tailings transportation infrastructure, and we're processing very large volumes. So those combinations are what economically allows us to work with this low-grade material in an economic way.
And how many pounds of copper did Amerigo produce in 2025, and what was the cash cost per pound?
In 2025, we produced north of 62 million pounds of copper, 62.2 million pounds of copper, and we had a normalized cash cost of $1.87 per pound. That's US dollars. Our production profile tends to be very stable year on year, and our cost performance reflects that model. So we are, as I was saying before, we're not incurring mining, stripping, or developing costs. And that allows us to operate in a very tight and predictable cost range, more so than any conventional mining producer. So the takeaway when we're talking about production and cash costs are not just the absolute numbers, but also how stable and predictable those production and cost numbers are, which is a defining aspect of how we can generate cash flow at Amerigo.
So now that you just touched on cash flow, why don't we move on and speak to your balance sheet? How much cash do you currently have on hand, and how will you allocate that cash in the coming year?
Sure. Well, one comment before giving you the figure. Our goal regarding cash is to maintain a healthy cash balance of around 30 million US at any given time, and to return everything else to our shareholders, provided that the board of directors sees a clear short-term outlook on copper prices. So, for example, March 31st, 2026, which is our most recent reporting date, we had cash of $57.2 million, which automatically led to the Amerigo board declaring our highest performance dividend to date. That was a dividend of 16 cents Canadian, which is equal to four of our quarterly dividends. And when you put together that performance dividend and the June quarterly dividend, that represented around $23 million, or give or take all of the excess that we had at the end of the quarter, over $30 million. So that's, I thought it was just important to provide that explanation so that people can see that we're not about accumulating extraordinarily high cash balances at Amerigo. We're more focused on having the ability of returning that cash back to shareholders as fast as possible.
And when you say as fast as possible, that's in the form of dividends and or buybacks?
We do both. We have a quarterly dividend, and that is our fundamental commitment to our shareholders. We started this dividend policy in October of 2021. We've paid 19 consecutive quarters of dividends now. We started at 2 cents Canadian per share per quarter, and we have doubled that over time to 4 cents, which is what we're paying right now. So that is the basic commitment. But on top of that, when there is additional cash flow generation in response to strong copper prices, as we've seen in recent years, we have two additional layers of or mechanisms to return flexibly that capital back to shareholders, and one of them are share buybacks. We've been very active on our buyback programs in the last 5 years, and the other ones are special dividends. We call them performance dividends.
And Aurora, when we look out into the future, Amerigo is a one asset company. And so I guess I wonder, where does the growth come from? Would you increase the size of this processing plant, or would you build another processing plant at another mine?
Well, it's a good question. And at Amerigo, we are not defining growth by producing more copper, but on growing value per share for our shareholders. We have a long life, well understood asset at MVC that we have already expanded to ensure that we can process all of the fresh tailings that are coming from El Teniente, and that we have additional capacity at the plant to process historic tailings to the extent of maximizing or utilizing in full the existing tailings um, infrastructure that connects the mine to our plant and our plant to the tailings deposit. So the growth at MBC has already been achieved to the top of the circuit that we have there. When we're talking about expanding, for example, beyond MBC, that's a different discussion and that's a different consideration. But I think it's important for us to fully explain that the growth at MBC has been achieved. We expanded that plant 10 years ago to have full capacity to process all of the material that was available to us through the contracts. And we have been able to work on that basis for 10 consecutive years with very consistently high production numbers. So the growth has been achieved, and we're the beneficiaries of having reached that profile through as much growth as we could obtain at NBC from 10 years ago to now.
And Amerigo stock has had a massive move here in the last couple of quarters. Is this due to operating efficiencies or the move in copper?
Well, I think that there have been a series of reasons for that stock appreciation, which we started seeing in Q4 of 2025. First of all, our copper prices. Copper prices have strengthened meaningfully, and that flows directly through our business. As I mentioned before, we have a relatively stable cost structure, so higher copper prices translate directly into an increase in free cash flow. So part of the move is simply the market recognizing that our cash flow and our returns expand quickly with strong copper price environments. Another aspect is the growing appreciation for the uniqueness of the Amerigo model. Investors are better understanding now that Amerigo offers a very unique value proposition, which we've just discussed before. And also, people are recognizing that we have very clear rules regarding capital allocation. We've been very clear and consistent in returning cash back to shareholders through the capital return strategy. So as the track record has built, investors have started applying a higher quality multiple to those cash flows. And it's not just what we generate, but how reliably we return it to shareholders. So I think that those are some of the factors that have contributed to the stock appreciation you mentioned.
And now that your market cap is over $1 billion, are you becoming more attractive to larger funds? Are you getting more inbound calls?
Well, crossing the billion threshold is important because it has moved us into a very different investability category. Some larger institutional investors, whether they are generalist funds, resource funds, or index-linked investors, they all have minimum market cap and liquidity requirements. And when you move past the 1 billion level, you become eligible for a broader pool of capital. So we have been on the radar of larger, longer-term institutional investors that may not have been able to participate with us before. As the ownership has broadened and trading volumes have increased, the stock has become easier to enter and exit at scale, and that also reinforces institutional interest. And we've also seen that inclusion in indices and ETFs has further increased our visibility. So all of those aspects have become more visible. And it's not that we're managing the business to reach a significant or a specific market cap. We're focused on delivering consistent cash flow, maintaining our balance sheet discipline, and remaining and returning the capital to shareholders. But as we do that, the market cap and investor base have tended to follow.
Well, congratulations on the success that you've achieved in the past year. And I want to thank you very much for spending time with us today and telling us the Amerigo story. And as we wrap up, maybe you can just express to the shareholders what they can expect in terms of news flow in the coming months from Amerigo Resources.
Yes, so we don't produce a news flow. We want to state that we are focused on our operational and financial results. So if anybody wants to check whether Amerigo continues to perform well over the next 12 months, I would tell them to focus on three clear indicators. One of them is operational consistency. Follow how our production is trending with our guidance, that we have stable recoveries, that we have smooth operations. Our MVC asset is a mature operation, so that should give us the ability to deliver on our promises quarter after quarter. The second aspect is check out our cost controls. Our business depends on us continuing to operate with discipline. We have known costs, and that allows us to convert production into actual cash. And the third one is capital allocation. Continue to monitor our discipline in using our surplus cash in the way we have stated we would be doing that through very clear and defined returns to shareholders. So if those three things hold, stable operations, control cost, and disciplined capital allocation, Amerigo will continue to execute well. So I hope that that is the case and that you follow us as we continue to move on this path.
Aurora, great overview. And once again, thank you.
Thank you so much. That was good. Thank you.